Don't you see the ships are coming? Don't you see them in full sail? Don't you see the ships are coming, with their prizes at their tail? How I love my rolling sailor when he's on the rolling sea. How can I be blithe and merry with my true love far from me? All the wars will soon be over, and the sailors once come home. Every lass would get her lad. She won't have to sleep alone. Oh, my little rolling sailor. Oh, my little rolling he. How I love my rolling sailor when he's on the rolling sea.
Hello and welcome to The Bad Spot and part 3 of The Last Star Marked, my brand new Sundered Isles campaign. At the top of the episode you will have heard an excerpt from the sea shanty The Rolling Sea, read wonderfully by the incredibly talented Michelle Kelly. Michelle is an actor, singer and voice actor based in Yorkshire, and if you follow the link to her stuff down in the description you'll see she has a vast catalogue of actual play performances and voice work out there in the ether, and you should definitely check some of that out because it really is rather good. And whilst I have your attention, why don't you leave a like, subscribe and click the little bell icon so you can follow along with the campaign each and every week. These things are really important for supporting the channel and supporting what I do, and if you really want to support the channel, then why not check out the Bad Spot Patreon. There you'll get early access to all episodes, exclusive behind the scenes content, and your name on screen like these lovely people. Last time out, Gideon made a desperate escape from Whitlock Manor in possession of the vial of mysterious blue flame. Every step of the way he is pursued by the deadly and relentless Felicity Devereaux, who shows she will stop at nothing to get what she wants. The escape through the manor house is chaotic and violent as Gideon is attacked by guards, thrown through a skylight and nearly killed as Felicity demonstrates the full extent of her prosthetic arm's lethal capabilities. It's only through the mischievous intervention of Lorenzo that he manages to escape her grasp, albeit somewhat dramatically through a first floor window. Gideon commandeers a horse and carriage and sets off, but with Whitlock Manor security and Felicity on horseback in hot pursuit. There is a high-speed chase in which the security wagon spins out and Felicity manages to board Gideon's carriage. Gideon manages to push her off before she can strike a killing blow, but not before she takes back the vial of blue flame. Heading into Port Emblyn too fast and out of control, Gideon's carriage upturns and smashes into pieces just before hitting a roadblock set up by the town militia. As the exhausted, battered and bruised Gideon tumbles out of the wreckage, Governess McCabe draws her sword on him, not because he is a threat, but because she has noticed something unusual, a strange glowing tattoo on his left wrist. Okay, so first things first, let's catch up with what we missed last time and mark progress on our vow and look at the move Reach a Milestone. Now, escaping that combat encounter definitely counts. You can frame that as either defeating a notable foe or overcoming an obstacle. Either way, marking progress on this dangerous vow takes us up to 8 out of 10. And do you know what? I think we will just fulfill our vow, I think. Let's have a look at the move. It says, when you reach the end of your quest, roll the challenge dice and compare to your progress. So we are at 8 progress. Let's roll the dice. That is a strong hit. On a strong hit, your vow is fulfilled. Mark a reward on your quest's legacy track as per the vow's rank. Okay, so that is now wrapped up and we get to mark our legacy track. So the legacy track, if you don't know, is broadly speaking how you track your character's development. When you fill in one of these boxes, you get 2 little nuggets of XP to spend, and you spend those on either unlocking new assets or upgrading existing ones. The way this works is that you do it in reverse, so the harder the quest is, the more ticks you mark. We've just completed a dangerous quest, so we can mark 2 ticks. So up to half a box of progress. Now, the question is, has anything we've done counted towards our background vow to lift the family curse? Now, I'm not very good at this. I'm not very good at keeping track of this, as anyone who has seen my Starforged game will attest to. But I wonder if we could make the case that by completing this vow for the governess, he has at least got himself out of the box, he got himself out of jail. And I think that's a pretty significant obstacle to lifting his family curse. So I'm going to have that. So we are going to mark 1 tick on this background vow. Only another 39 ticks to go. Okay, so with all the outstanding bookkeeping done, let's begin. Governess Sabrina McCabe has just absorbed a lot of information. She is standing in her office and it is all polished mahogany and navy blue leather. She is leaning against her grand ornate desk. Her arms are folded and she is looking both troubled and incredulous. Sitting before her in a winged leather armchair, tending delicately to the cuts and scrapes on his face with some gauze and rubbing alcohol, is Gideon Finch. And he winces as he cleans a scrape across his brow. And he's holding this small silver hand mirror and he's looking kind of mournfully at the damage done to what he thinks is far too pretty a face. And the governess says, "I have one more question." And Gideon kind of reacts and says, "Please, I've had a very challenging evening." The governess moves over to the window and she throws open the shutters and the morning sun floods into the office. She continues, "Of all the details from your account of what happened, which I believe, there is still one thing I cannot fathom. How on earth did you live?" And Gideon kind of matter-of-factly says, "I told you. She hesitated. She wanted the vial, not me." And the governess kind of pauses gravely and says, "Do you remember asking me why it had to be you? Why you had to do this for me? And me telling you all my other operatives had been compromised?" Gideon says, "Vaguely." And she says, "Well, they were all killed. By her. And she did not hesitate." And Gideon kind of looks up from his mirror for the first time and says, "That's interesting." And she says, "It is. Felicity Devereaux killed 6 of my operatives, men and women with years of field experience. But you, a 2-bit charlatan rotting in the box, press-ganged into service at the 11th hour, manages to get so close and walk away without a scratch." And Gideon is indignant. He says, "Firstly, 2-bit charlatan, rude. Secondly, I'd hardly say without a scratch." And the governess says, "I wonder." And she drops down to a crouch, kind of to his eye level as he sits. And she holds his wrist and she turns it, exposing his tattoo, and says, "I wonder if there is anything else you aren't telling me." And he pulls his arm away and he stands up and moves away from her, kind of turning his back. And she notices how protective he's being. This is the first time that she has seen anything like genuine, sincere emotion from him. He pulled away. He tried to protect himself rather than just come back at her with his usual bullshit. And do you know what? This feels like the appropriate moment to make a move. And that move is develop your relationship, which says, when you reinforce your relationship with a connection by doing any of the following, and it gives us a whole bunch of options, a lot like reach a milestone, it says you may mark progress as per the rank of the connection. So like I said, this is like reach a milestone, but specifically for relationships. There's no rolling of dice, although that can come into play later if you want to forge a bond with your connection. But I think that we can definitely develop this relationship. Now, we swore a vow to infiltrate the party at Whitlock Manor, and we also completed that quest, so that is progress. The governess is ranked as dangerous, so that is 1 box each time. So 1 for swearing the vow and the other for completing it takes us up to 2 out of 10. And also, I think I'd like to establish that she is the only person who has seen this tattoo. She hasn't told anyone else, any of her staff or anything, and I don't think she will. So Gideon and the governess actually share a secret, which I think is worth a lot. Even though that secret wasn't given freely by Gideon, I think the fact that she knows it and hasn't immediately raised the alarm, I think means that Gideon in some way realizes he can trust her with that secret. I think that meets more than one of the criteria of this move, and I think I'm going to frame this as sharing a profound moment. So that is another box filled, up to 3 out of 10. And I'm really keen to keep checking in on this relationship because The Last Star Marked is a more social game. Gideon's a more social character, so I think his relationships are going to be slightly more important in my Starforged game. My starting connection sort of drifted in and out of the story. And whilst the Conduit was a pretty cool character who was very memorable and great for the story, she didn't actually fulfill that connection role in game. So I really want to lean into this in The Last Star Marked and, you know, try and play the game properly. I think it's something I want to do. So back to the fiction. The governess senses, perhaps with Gideon's reaction, that she might have crossed a line. She might have kind of infringed upon one of his boundaries, if he has any. And she gives him that little bit of space. And he breaks the awkward silence that's hanging in the air between them, and he says, "Now I did what you asked. I went where you wanted me to go and found out what you needed to know. If it's all the same to you, I'll take that freedom you offered and be on my way." And the governess doesn't react to this. She just sits down behind her desk, this kind of ornate, big mahogany desk, and Lorenzo has found his way into the office, because obviously he has, and I think he's perched on the end of her desk, and he's found like a little bowl of nuts or something, and he's just kind of busily munching away. And the governess says, "I'm afraid I can't let you leave, Mr. Finch." And Gideon smiles to himself, a wry smile, and says, "So it's the wall, is it? I figured as much. No point me taking up space in the box now that I've served my purpose." And the governess just kind of fixes him with a look and something like a smile, or what passes for a smile with the governess. And as if on cue, there is a commotion at the window, the one she just opened. There is a brief, loud flapping as a large, yellow-beaked seagull lands on the sill, and Gideon barely even kind of notices it. He is kind of slightly more concerned with his own imminent execution. But the gull hops into the office, kind of along the windowsill and onto the desk, and Lorenzo kind of protectively guards this bowl of nuts and hisses at the gull, which kind of squawks angrily back. And the governess reaches out and starts fiddling with something on the gull's leg. And that's when the penny drops for Gideon. She takes something small from the gull's leg. It's not visible at first glance. It's a roll of yellow wax paper. She takes it delicately in her hands and unfurls it. She reads whatever is on it and looks up at Gideon and says, "Welcome to the Etide, Mr. Finch." So yeah, I've been thinking quite a lot about the Etide and like who they are and what it might mean. Let's remind ourselves with what we know about them from Session 0. It says, they are a covert insurgency of spies and saboteurs. They seek to cripple imperial ambitions from within and use trained gulls to carry vital messages to collaborators. Now, we always knew, kind of as an audience, that Sabrina McCabe was in the Etide, and she has just revealed that to Gideon. And Gideon knows who they are, and he knows what that means. He now knows that Sabrina McCabe is a spy. And he knows, more importantly, I think, that by sharing this, she's just recruited him. He is being forcibly inducted into a network of spies, and forcibly because he knows that it's this or death. And Gideon is like furious because he doesn't want to be a spy. But he also doesn't want to be dead. Like, he doesn't want to have to care about anything but himself and Lorenzo. But now it looks like that is all ruined. He is in deep. And also, I think, kind of interestingly, from a relationship standpoint, she's really shown her full hand. Like, she's taking a massive risk here. She's known Gideon for less than a day, and she has revealed this, which is interesting. And I kind of wonder whether that might be tied to the tattoo, or whether it just says more about her situation or the position that the Etide might be in. But either way, this is a pretty big moment. But what does it mean? Now, she found a message on the gull's leg. What did the message say? Well, I do not know. Let's ask the oracle, shall we? 81 is risk, and 12 is commerce. Risk and commerce. So I wonder if this is linked to Felicity, right, and the events of last night, because the gathering at Whitlock Manor was based around commerce, wasn't it? It was for merchants and guilds and kind of trade and that kind of stuff, wasn't it? But I kind of feel like the Whitlock Manor part of this story is kind of done. Like, we know everything that happened there. So I wonder whether it actually is related to what happened in the aftermath, like what happened after. Because the last we saw of Felicity, she had kind of slinked away down a kind of darkened alleyway with a vial in hand, presumably to get out of Port Emblyn. But I wonder, because of Gideon's intervention, like, what if something went wrong? Like, what if her contact that she was rendezvousing with, what if they didn't show, maybe? And suddenly she found herself with no way out of Port Emblem, and also with the authorities aware of her. So what if the risk part of this is that she had to leave a different way? She had to stow away on a merchant vessel. I think that works. It covers both risk and commerce. And yeah, that kind of explains what that might mean. So actually, before we get ahead of ourselves, I think that we need to be swearing another vow, right? Because we're getting into this. The governess is desperate. She's no agents to call upon, and Gideon has just been deputized into the Etide. He's now a spy. This could be her greatest mistake, but time is of the essence, and Gideon is going to have to get a move on if he is going to try and catch up with Felicity, because she's more than likely left Port Emblyn, which is obviously bad news because they want to know where she's going and why. So is that our vow? Is it to find out where she's going or to stop her, even though we kind of don't really know what she's doing yet? I think from a story perspective, I think he has to kind of track her down more than anything and report on her whereabouts. But I also think he's going to be under very strict instructions that he absolutely cannot engage, right? Which is interesting because, as we've established, he is incredibly attracted to her. And I think that maybe there's something kind of mutual about that. Like, probably not, but he survived. And I think Gideon being Gideon, I think he thinks that the reason he survives is absolutely because, like, he's too handsome to murder. And I think that's actually more interesting, that he has to track her down and not engage, because is Gideon going to be able to resist blowing his cover? So let's have a look at the move. Swear an Iron Vow says, when you swear to complete a quest, write your vow and give it a rank, then roll +heart. If you swear this vow to a connection, add +1. So I think I'm going to keep it very straightforward and simple. I'm going to call it Find Felicity Devereaux. And in terms of how hard it's going to be in rank, I never go harder than dangerous, mainly because for the purposes of this show, it just takes too long. But then I've been kind of thinking about this. Like, I think it takes too long because I am famously quite good at forgetting that I'm doing quests and also failing to mark progress on them. Those of you who watched any of my Starforged game will know that I swore an epic vow quite early on in season 1, and I fulfilled it with half the boxes ticked about 40 episodes later. Frankly, we don't have that kind of time here. But I've been thinking, like I said, what if I actually did call this an epic vow and I actually did commit to doing it properly? Can I be trusted with that sort of responsibility, with my reputation for doing things very badly. And do you know what? I think I can be trusted. I think I'm all grown up now and I'm going to do this and no one can stop me. I'm going to make the vow to find Felicity Devereaux epic. So Gideon is experiencing this wild mix of emotions right now. He's just been drafted into the resistance against his will and given a mission to track the woman who last night very nearly killed him on several occasions, which is kind of rough, but also they did kind of have a connection, I think he feels. So, you know, he's conflicted. And he's turning all this over in his head as he looks at the governess, who is once again holding out an ancient black iron knife, and Gideon grasps the handle and says, without being prompted, "By iron, I vow." So let's roll some dice. We get a +1 connection bonus, and we're rolling against our strongest stat. So let's swear an iron vow, rolling plus heart. That is a weak hit. On a weak hit, you are determined, but begin your quest with more questions and answers. Take +1 momentum and envision what you do to find a path forward. Now, a weak hit isn't terrible, and I actually forgot that we didn't burn our momentum last time. We didn't actually have to, which is weird for us because we usually find ourselves trying to kind of bail ourselves out at least once per episode, but it appears not. So the +1 momentum takes us up to 10, up to maximum, and that's pretty handy at the start of a quest. It kind of like acts as an immediate get out of jail free card. So, you know, that's good. But also this is a weak hit. Now, the thing about more questions than answers might mean that there is something else more to figure out. And kind of looking at how things went down last time, I wonder whether we have to try and figure out something to do with the MacGuffin, you know, the little vial of blue fire. Because whilst that is just a MacGuffin to kind of get the story going, it's clearly important. So I wonder, as part of this vow, whether we might need to specifically find out exactly what that blue fire is. How we do that, I don't know. Like, I think we'll figure that out as we go. But I will definitely make a note of that and not forget, I promise. And also, speaking of forgetting, let's develop our relationship again, because swearing an iron vow to a connection, and also maybe the fact that we've just joined her spy network, I think that is definitely worthy of progress. So our relationship is up to 4 out of 10. Now, back in the office, the governess takes the knife back and says, "Get some rest. You'll need to move under cover of darkness after we execute you." And Gideon says, "Excuse me?" The governess says, "Whitlock Manor is demanding I release the interloper who caused a great deal of damage at a private function held there last night. Ring any bells?" Gideon says, "First I've heard of it." And the governor says, "They know we have the fiend in custody. I told them he really is a wretched swine wanted for a long, tawdry list of unsavoury crimes. I said I would have him tried and shot by sundown. It seemed to appease them." And she gets up and she moves over to him and she kind of runs her fingers down the kind of collar of his jacket and says, "I regret to say I shall require this outfit back." So we're not going to dwell on that. The governess, clearly about to execute another prisoner in Gideon's party clothes. I think that she's definitely someone who is unafraid to do awful things, I guess. Or maybe has had to compromise the odd moral or two whilst being a spy. But like I said, let's not dwell on that. Let's move on. And I think we are going to have a little interlude scene here as Gideon tries to get some rest. Now, interlude scenes are new to Sundered Isles, and they're an addition that I could not be happier about. They are little narrative scenes that are low stakes and character focused. They are the sort of scenes that I used to include in my Starforged game all the time. And now they are an optional part of the game rules, which I think is really neat. And as I said, I want to frame up a little scene where Gideon is getting some rest before heading out. So there is an oracle to roll on to generate a little scene, and I am going to use it, but I'm going to pick and not roll. I'm going to pick the result that says, "Conjure up the past." And there are a couple of little narrative prompts connected to this. What is the subject of this reminiscence? Why is it meaningful in this moment? And in addition, our little interlude scene is going to pull double duty here because we're going to use it to make a move and mechanically recover. So let's envision this and answer those two questions. What is the subject of this reminiscence and why is it meaningful in this moment? So Gideon is resting up in another room somewhere in the building where the governess's office can be found. I think we'll say it's Port Embelyn's central administrative building. And Gideon is in a chamber somewhere that has a bed and a desk. It's well appointed, and maybe it's used for like visiting dignitaries. Gideon has continued to patch his wounds, the cuts and scrapes that cover his face and hands. And he takes off his loose white shirt and looks at his lean torso in the full-length mirror in the corner of the room. His left shoulder is blackened with bruises, and he groans and hears the crunch as he slowly rotates it, trying to work out the stiffness. He looks down at his wrist and looks at the tattoo that has now been seen by Governess McCabe, and he feels exposed. To have it on such open display makes him feel vulnerable, and he looks at it almost as if discovering its terrible detail for the first time. He keeps it covered so much that he rarely takes the time to look at it, this jagged spiral that looks partly like a coiled snake, partly like shattered glass. Its glow has faded completely in the daylight, but the feelings it invokes in him are always the same. He feels a hollowness, an emptiness, a sadness, and he traces the outline with his finger, and he finds himself remembering the last time another person had seen this, the last time he felt so vulnerable. And we see a glimpse of this memory. It's hazy and dreamlike, and we kind of sense that it is a warm, pleasant memory. We can hear the crashing of distant waves, the call of circling seabirds. We are in a lighthouse, the slowly rotating lantern high above, an orange glow rhythmically pulsating into the living quarters below. We see Gideon Finch, much younger, fresher faced, in a similar state of undress. He is shirtless, he is looking at his wrist, he is looking at that tattoo. And a pair of hands emerge and slip tenderly around his waist, and he smiles. These are a woman's hands. They are dark-skinned, and her fingers are now dancing playfully along his arms, fingers tracing the outline of his tattoo. And her face is nuzzled into his back as she holds him close. He closes his eyes and he loses himself in the moment. And when he opens his eyes, we are back. We are back in the chambers. He looks at himself in the mirror, and the memory has gone, the smile has receded, and he wraps his wrist quickly with fresh bandages covering the tattoo, and he does it twice over to be sure. And before he throws on another shirt, he turns his side to the mirror, and we see a long, ugly scar between his ribs, and that seems to dissipate the reverie completely. Let's make a move. That move is heal, which says when you receive medical care or provide treatment, envision the situation and roll. We are treating our own wounds, so it will be with iron or wits, whichever is lower, and that for us is iron. That is a weak hit. On a strong hit, it says the care is helpful. If you are wounded, clear the impact and give +2 health. Otherwise, take +3 health. But we rolled a weak hit, which says as above, but the recovery costs extra time or resources. Choose one, and we can either lose momentum or resources. And I think the momentum makes a bit of sense here. I think I kind of want to knock back how generally ready he is for what he's about to do. So we will go down to 8 momentum, because maybe the memory that he has just kind of indulged in has made him feel less sure about what he's about to do. So, or maybe it reminded him of the last time he trusted someone, or the last time that he was betrayed. And for the record, I have no answer to that. That little flashback is just the seed of something in Gideon's past. I do not know what it is, and I do not know what it will grow into, but let's find out together. So it is nighttime, and Port Emberlin's docks are still busy. There are still ships being unloaded. There are stevedores and various other crew members walking cargo up and down gangplanks and swinging these vast crane arms full of goods down onto the docks. Before we actually do anything, it's nighttime, so let's quickly see what the Twin Fates are doing. Okay, Cinder is brighter, but it's not full. It has waned somewhat. It was full last night, so that kind of makes sense. But we'll keep in mind that Cinder is kind of brightest in the sky. So whilst this dock is busy, it's nowhere near as busy as it would be during the day, this is a major port, and ships continually come and go, but it's nighttime, so there's far fewer ships coming in. And I think that maybe most of the work that's being done here is unloading ships that maybe were late coming in, and the crews are working around the clock to get them unloaded so they can kind of catch up with their schedules or whatever. And amongst this, there is also the scenes that you would expect to see at a busy working docks. There are down on their luck mariners looking for work. There's probably someone playing an accordion. I think that's standard at the docks. There are sailors drinking and singing and gambling at upturned crates and barrels. Gideon looks relaxed. He's leaning idly against a wall, watching the world go by, looking for all money like just another denizen of the docks. He's wearing new clothes. He's wearing a dark grey shirt under a snug-fitting, double-breasted navy blue jacket. His wounds have been patched, and whilst he could never pass as hired muscle down here, the cuts and scrapes on his face are giving him something of a rough edge. And for all intents and purposes, he doesn't stand out. He looks probably like someone seeking passage out of Port Emberlin, and as such doesn't look out of place, which is exactly what he is trying to do. But he's also doing something else. He is watching. He is watching a small building at the centre of the dock, and this building is raised up to first story height by wooden stilts. And it's a square box, really, more than a building. It's no more than a room in size. It has a flat roof and a balcony out in front that leads to a short set of stairs that takes you down to the docks. This is the harbour master's office, and Gideon is watching, and Gideon is waiting for an opportunity to get inside. The lead that the governess has given him, the lead that has brought him to the docks, is that this is the last known location of Felicity Devereaux, and the harbour master's office will hold the details of what ship she left on, and more importantly, where that ship was going. And we're going to try and gain access to the office, which is a problem because the harbour master is currently in the office, or more specifically, she is out on the balcony looking out over her domain, which is, the docks and rows of ships and dozens of people. And like I said, it is quieter than during the day, but it is busy enough for this time of night. And Gideon looks and sees Lorenzo. Lorenzo is up on the roof of the office, prowling around. And they are both obviously in cahoots, and they are waiting for their moment. And with this being a working dock, that moment doesn't take too long to come, because down below, 2 sailors who have been playing whatever the Sundered Isles equivalent is of chess get into a heated exchange. One of them flips the board on the table, and the other gets to their feet and starts throwing hands. And Gideon watches as the harbour master, a slender, olive-skinned woman in her 40s, completely stony-faced, and she's chewing on this ivory pipe, He watches as she quickly descends the stairs to go and break it up. And this is their moment. Gideon nods to Lorenzo, who excitedly slinks in through an open window. And as the dispute rages angrily, Gideon strides across the dock and begins to climb the backside of the office, obscured from view. And this is going to be a move, and that move is going to be Face Danger, which says, when you attempt something risky or react to an imminent threat, envision your action and roll. And this is absolutely stealth, as we are trying to do this quietly. So let's Face Danger, rolling plus shadow. Okay, that is a weak hit. On a weak hit, you succeed, but not without cost. Make a suffer move -1. So I'm going to say that we get up there unnoticed. But I think we realised as we do get up there that the window at the back of the office, and Gideon has to go up the back to kind of cover himself from everyone seeing him. That window at the back of the office, that doesn't open. Like, that's just glass. That's not a window. So I think this is going to be a lot harder than we thought. And it's going to be harder because, like, Gideon can't get in. But Lorenzo is in. So he is going to have to try and instruct Lorenzo silently through a closed window to find what we're looking for, which I think makes like sufficient sense for us to make our suffer move a hit to the momentum. So having begun at maximum momentum, we are now down to 7, and we haven't even done anything yet. So, like, well done, everyone. That's really good going. So Gideon hauls himself up the side of this building, every part of his body still aching from last night. And he tries the window and finds out it just doesn't open. It's not one that opens. And inside, Lorenzo is excitedly already like rooting through the contents of the harbour master's desk. And like Gideon has to rap on the window and kind of get his attention because Lorenzo has become distracted somewhat by a heel of bread and a little bit of cheese that's been left on the desk unfinished. And like Gideon is kind of trying to, as loudly but also as quietly as he can, like get Lorenzo to focus on the task. And that task is to find out like what ship Felicity left on and where it's going. So that's going to be another move. And that move is gather information, which says when you search for clues, conduct an investigation, analyze evidence, or do research roll plus wits. And we're doing this kind of by proxy. Lorenzo is our inside man and Gideon is on the outside, frustratedly trying to direct things. So let's gather information, rolling plus wits. Okay, that is a weak hit. On a weak hit, the information provides new insight, but also complicates your quest. Envision what you discover, then take +1 momentum. So this investigation is a shambles. I'll tell you now. Like, it is a shambolic scene of Gideon trying to silently guide Lorenzo to the correct item on the desk, which is, I don't know, like a manifest or something, like a list of ships, whatever, it doesn't really matter. And we see him doing this. He is trying kind of patiently to instruct Lorenzo towards the thing that's really obviously on the desk. And Lorenzo is picking up literally everything else on the desk and like proudly like presenting it to Gideon. There's like half an apple, an ink bottle, a horseshoe, just like the ephemera that's on this desk. Every single piece of it, Lorenzo seems more interested in, other than the exact piece of paper that Gideon needs. And Gideon is like, Jesus fucking Christ, I swear to God, just get me the manifest. And Lorenzo finally gathers it up and Gideon reacts excitedly. And Lorenzo brings it over to the window and Gideon strains to read it in the light. And he sees the only ship that left in the time frame last night written there in black and white. And before we figure out what that ship was and where it was going, we need to claw back some momentum from the gather information move. So that's back up to 8 now. So yeah, let's establish what this ship is and where's it going. We know it's a merchant vessel. We established that already, but let's roll up some more details. There is a kind of a size guide for ships in the book, and I'll just pick the one that makes the most sense. This is going to be a medium-sized corvette that has 3 masts. So let's roll up some details about the ship, and we'll use the extensive ship oracles, which I love. But they are laid out as if you're rolling up the details, as if sighting the ship for the first time, as in at sea. So this might seem like a weird order to discover some of this stuff out in, but let's not worry about that too much. Firstly, let's find out what symbol or emblem adorns its mast. 53 is noble figure. And what cargo is this ship carrying? 83 is tobacco. And finally, what is this ship's name? 52 is Mistress of the Isles. Now that is very cool. And I guess that's who the noble figure is. I think that the mast depicts this legendary queen, but that name, I think the Mistress of the Isles, gives it like a little bit of an edge. So I think that this legendary queen is actually a legendary pirate queen. The Mistress of the Isles is this legendary pirate queen. I love that very much. So we need a complication from that weak hit on the gather information roll. No, actually, should we figure out where it's going first? Although they could be the same thing. I think where we're going and what the complication is might be the same question. So let's take a look at our map. And incidentally, I've been asked how I made this map, and it's using a website called Incarnate, which is pretty amazing for map making. And whilst there is a free version, the paid version is incredible. I'll just stick a link in the description below. Anyway, we are down in Port Emberlin on the island of New Harlock. And I don't really want at this point for the adventure to start kind of becoming hugely expansive just yet. So I don't want to go off to the other islands on our map. So I wonder whether or not this ship, the Mistress of the Isles, this fast, reliable ship, is basically just a runner that nightly hops between the two islands that make up New Harlock. Like, we've not established anything about this place really, so maybe we roll up another settlement on the northern island, and that's where the ship goes between. So let's just give it a name for now. Okay, 13 is Crown Falls. So we'll add that to the map and we'll establish some more details about that later. But what I'm thinking is, in terms of our complication, what if this boat, the Mistress of the Isles, is notoriously used by smugglers, but smugglers who slip off the ship and go to another place, like they row inland somewhere else on the islands? And what if our complication is figuring out which route Felicity took? So let's add another settlement and let's tuck it away on the south side of the northern island. And let's roll up a name. And I think actually, because we want to throw a complication into the mix and it feels appropriate, should we see if it's cursed? The result is 36. Okay, that's fine. Now let's roll the cursed die. Remember, everyone, odd results are cursed. It is cursed. So the cursed result for 36 settlement name is Fool's Rest. That's pretty cool sounding. So let's stick that on the map. Okay, so this corvette goes to and fro between here and Crown Falls every night, but a smaller smuggler's boat rows ashore to Fool's Rest. And Gideon knows this ship by reputation, I think. And he honestly couldn't tell you at this point which is more likely to be the destination for Felicity, because Crown Falls is certainly bigger, probably easier to lose yourself. There's more connections there probably. But Fool's Rest is a place where not good stuff happens. And I'm intrigued to find out where we end up. But before we do, let's stay on top of things and reach a milestone on our epic vow, because I think that narrowing down where she has gone is definitely meaningful insight. So we are up to half a box out of 10. So Gideon and Lorenzo quickly leave the scene, and the harbour master will be thoroughly baffled by the mess left by these two intruders. And we rejoin them as they are standing on the gangplank leading up to the Mistress of the Isles, which is, it's like a very characterful ship. Like, it's seen some action. Its hull is taken a battering, but it also looks like it could really move, like it could really shift in a chase. And the mast does indeed depict in yellow on maroon this stylized image of a pirate queen, and she's like dual wielding pistols and smirking. And I think that's just a really cool image. So how are we getting aboard? So I think that because it runs every night, they must take passengers in addition to cargo. I think they have a small consignment that they can put aside for passengers. And I'm going to say that as the last few bits of cargo are loaded, there is this patient line of passengers waiting to board, and that's where we meet Gideon and Lorenzo. And I think you need something to get on board. I don't think the Sundered Isles is the kind of place to have like written boarding passes or anything, but I think that you maybe need a token. If you've paid for passage on a boat, you need like a token or a chit or something. And I'm going to slightly retcon and say that whilst Lorenzo was rooting around in the harbour master's office, he inadvertently took one, and now they've got passage on this ship. Because I don't want to get embroiled in rolling dice and making moves just to kind of get aboard a boat, because I think we should be able to just do that. And Gideon is apprehensive, like being aboard a boat and being on the water. He is not comfortable doing this, but he is slightly comforted by the fact that Wraith, the moon of Wraith, is not full, which is one of the things, remember, that seems to precede his curse kicking in. But I think just being on a boat and being on the water has an immediate effect on him. He is star-marked, and remember, he is the last star-marked. And having put some thought into this about what that means and what that might feel like, I think he feels like he is a needle on a compass, like something inside of him that he can't control is pulling, drawing him in a certain direction. And I think that under the right conditions, this can be incredibly overwhelming and he can't control anything about himself. But tonight, because of the moons and the tides, he is just about able to keep it in check. The Mistress of the Isles has a crew of about 40, and it's carrying, I'd say, about 20 passengers. It's a clear night, and the water is relatively calm. This short voyage between Port Emberlyn and Crown Falls in this quick ship still takes the best part of 5 hours, which gives Gideon plenty of time to kill. Now, feeling the way he does, he feels like he needs something to distract him, and he decides he's going to stretch his legs and take a walk around the deck. Now, a lot of the ship and the deck is closed off and guarded by the crew, but passengers are free to walk around and take the air. Now, he's also trying to find something out, right? He's looking for clues to try and find out if he can glean any more information about where Felicity went. And I currently have no idea what this clue is going to be, and if I'm honest, what that even looks like. So I'm going to make the move, and then we'll hit some oracles. So the move is going to be gather information, which says when you search for clues, conduct an investigation, analyze evidence, or do research, roll plus wits. So let's do that now. Rolling plus wits. Ooh, that's a miss. On a miss, your investigation unearths a dire threat or reveals an unwelcome truth that undermines your quest. Pay the price. Now, I can't make this anything other than a weak hit by burning our momentum. But that's a doozy, because the dire threat or unwelcome truth is immediately saying to me that like one of two things is true here. One is Felicity's on the boat now, or two, Felicity was never on this boat. Now the former is dramatically pretty interesting, but that actually really messes with the epic vow we've got running, because we will have essentially just found her straight away, and we then have to just follow her, I guess, which I can't really see how that will work without forsaking the vow. Now, if she never got on the boat yesterday, then we're just completely wasting our time. And it sucks, but I think I am going to burn the momentum and make this a weak hit. So let's reset our momentum down to 2 and make this a weak hit. It says on a weak hit, the information provides new insight, but also complicates your quest. Envision what you discover, then take +1 momentum. So let's bump our momentum immediately back up to 3. And the reason I did that, kind of out of game commentary here, is that, like, in this moment, a complication for me is easier to envision. And that complication is that we find evidence, we don't know what that is yet, but we find evidence that she took the Smugglers boat to Fool's Rest, because that's just an easier complication, that Fool's Rest is one of our 2 options and we have to go to the one that's more dangerous, right? I could sit here all day probably and come up with a good narrative twist for a straight miss, but I don't want to. Like, sometimes you just got to go with what seems easier, or you'll be thinking about it forever. And whilst I do like to think about things a lot and take my time on a lot of these roles and interpretations, sometimes you do just have to kind of get on with it. So what's the clue that leads us to this conclusion? The conclusion that she took the smuggler's boat to Fool's Rest. Let's ask the oracle, shall we? Okay, 81 is ruined, and 87 is tool. Ruined tool. Well, this is actually a cool result, and I think I have something. So I think as Gideon is strolling around the deck, and he's still fighting that pull that kind of comes and goes, he notices that over to the port side of the ship, where the lifeboats are, and there are like 5 or 6 lifeboats strapped to the side, there are some people, and they are very sketchy looking people, and they're just hanging around, and they appear to be guarding the lifeboats. And Gideon this strikes him as odd, and he gets about as close as he can without arousing suspicion. And he looks down the side of the boat and sees that in amongst the lifeboats that are strapped to the side of the ship, there is actually one boat that looks a little different. It's a little narrower, it's a little sleeker, and at first glance, it would pass as a lifeboat, but on closer inspection, it's a smuggler's longboat. And the 2 shifty-looking sorts stood guarding it are our smugglers, because Gideon watches surreptitiously as various people throughout the voyage discreetly approach the smugglers and trade a brief exchange of words or currency. It's all very kind of cloak and dagger, very clandestine. And it appears that this is how you get to Fool's Rest. But Gideon sees something, and this is what convinces him that he has to get aboard. And it's something he sees as the smugglers are preparing the longboat. He sees one of them calling up to the other and showing them there's something wrong. And one of the smugglers hands up one of the oars from the longboat to the other, and Gideon watches them inspecting it. And the oar is clearly broken, and Gideon can't quite see from where he is, like how or why. So he moves closer to get a better look, but before he realizes it, he has wandered straight up to the smugglers, and he can see them looking at the handle of this oar, and it is splintered, as if it has been crushed by an incredibly strong hand. And Gideon can see there are distinct finger marks compressed into the wood. Felicity's finger marks. This is our ruined tool and the clue that puts us back on the trail. And I think that also counts as valuable insight. So therefore, I think we have reached a milestone in our vow, which puts us up to 1 out of 10. So Felicity was definitely on board. She was definitely on board the Mistress of the Isles, and she definitely went with the smugglers. And from the looks of the ruined handle of that oar, her arm is probably still glitching out. But now, because he went over to get a closer look, Gideon is now face to face with the smugglers, having kind of just wandered over. And not wanting to give himself away and show that he was looking at that, he slips immediately into scoundrel mode and says, "I'm looking for safe passage to Fool's Rest. No cargo and no questions asked." And the smugglers kind of look at each other because they're confused by this. Like, there's no money being offered, and I think this is clearly not how it's normally done. But Gideon continues and says, "On safe arrival, your discretion will be richly rewarded." And this is 100% a move because he is totally bullshitting them. So this move will be compel. It says, when you try to persuade someone or make them an offer, envision your approach. And we are definitely lying here. And I think once again, we will absolutely use our scoundrel asset, which says when you make a move by lying, bluffing, stealing, or cheating, add +2. So let's try and talk our way onto this smuggler's boat by trying to compel these two, rolling plus shadow. That is a strong hit on a strong hit. They'll do what you want or agree to your conditions. Take +1 momentum. Let's add that momentum now. We hop back up to 4. God, that scoundrel asset is good. I think it's inevitably going to backfire at some point, but that's not today. So these smugglers, and there are two of them, they are both pale-skinned, and there is a big one and a little one. The big one is bald, heavy set, and he has an ugly scar running diagonally across his face. And the little one is gaunt, and she has angular features, and it looks as though she would slit your throat for sneezing, right? She looks pretty mean. And they look at Gideon. They kind of look him up and down. Then they share a glance between them, and they nod in agreement. Gideon is in. And I think at this point there's not much else to do on the Mistress of the Isles before we set off, but what I might do is roll up something on the oracles for a bit of flavour to roll into our description. So let's do that now. 42 says, a multitude of jellyfish glimmer like pale lanterns. Okay, we'll use that. So Gideon and Lorenzo are sitting on the smuggler's longboat. There are, should we say, 6 stations, seats, each with a set of oars. And Gideon seats himself at the oars with the splintered handle, and he slides his fingers into the deep grooves left by Felicity's hand, the hand that was last night locked around his wrist. And he feels the pain in his shoulder, still smarting from that encounter, and he settles in for a long few hours of rowing. And as the last of the passengers takes their seat and takes up their oars, the smugglers board. Now, the big one sits at the stern in the seat behind Gideon. And the little one, she takes her place at the front, and she's like leaning lazily against the prow, looking back at the passengers. The Mistress of the Isles begins to move away as its masts take the wind, and it buffets the longboat in its wake. Beneath the surface of the inky black water, there is a brief glimmer of blue and purple as the depths come to bioluminescent life, as a vast swarm of jellyfish drift beneath the boat. Their tendrils pulsate with white and purple, and it transfixes everyone on board. And the little smuggler says, "All right, everyone, light show's over. Put your backs into it." Gideon feels that pull again, but he stifles it. He takes up the oars and begins to row. And this is a move. And that move is set a course, which says when you travel a known route through perilous seas, across hazardous terrain, or within a mysterious site, roll plus supply. Our supply is currently 5, so we're in good shape here. So we are travelling a well-established route. So let's set a course. Rolling plus supply. That is a miss. On a miss, you are waylaid by a significant threat and must pay the price. If you overcome the obstacle, you may push on safely to your destination. Oh boy, I don't think I want us to get waylaid, so I'm going to be a little loose with the interpretation of this. I think I want us to get there, but I think it's going to be bad, and I think I have something for this. So the longboat pulls away, and Gideon is clearly not the strongest of rowers. And the big smuggler at the back notices this and kind of leans forward and slaps Gideon on the back and says, "Come on, lad, give it some elbow grease." And he laughs loudly as he reclines and watches everyone row slowly and rhythmically. Briefly, cinder emerges from some patchy clouds in the sky and gives the water an eerie pink hue. The big smuggler catches the eye of the little smuggler and nods towards Gideon. And as she watches Gideon struggle, she smiles, her lips revealing a mouthful of crooked teeth, set into one of which is a glistening red ruby. And Gideon, he just continues to row, stroke after stroke, oblivious to what is going on. On his back, where the big smuggler slapped him, Cinder's light illuminates something else. The shimmering outline of a red hand. Thank you a million times. Thank you for watching. Please like this video, subscribe if you have not done so already, and click the little bell icon so you can be notified as soon as the next video drops. I'll be back next time, but until then, it is farewell and safe passage.